All right, I'm with Matt Wilson of Sterling Metals. This is a new company to me at least, a new company to Goldfinger Capital. I'm pretty sure it's a new company to a lot of the people watching this video, quite frankly. So we're going to get into it with Matt today. Matt, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me here. Fun to talk about this. I agree, very new story for the most part.
Yeah, it's a really interesting company. But before we get into the project in Ontario and some of the details of the company, I'd like to learn a little bit about how you are and how the company came about.
Yeah, so this company was really, it was founded in 2020 during COVID. It was a shell. I had been running it before. I actually used to be a gold production / exploration company that I took over in 2017 down in Paraguay, where, you know, that asset didn't quite work out. We sold it to the Paraguayan government and pushed forward and had the shell for 2 years. And during COVID, when there was this metals inflation push, I was chatting with a buddy of mine over at Altius Resources, and we found this silver copper big thing in northern Newfoundland, and that's kind of where this got going. And it's the company has really evolved since then to really look for big copper in Canada. That's really the focus that we've had, and there's a lot of circumstances that kind of came together to get us here, but that's really been the push the last 3 years, 4 years. It's just to focus domestically, where Canada has less than 1% of global copper reserves, where, you know, now in the world with protectionist policy, like, it's a good thing to have copper, the most critical of all metals, at home. So that really was the push that we had kind of to form this all.
Okay, so what's your background and how did you become the CEO of Sterling?
I spent the last 16 years in venture capital. My first foray into the TSXV and mining was with a hedge fund, venture ETF fund called Pine Tree Capital, which some may know and some may not. And when I joined Pine Tree, we owned 400 and something positions in the junior mining space. And I was totally green coming out of university. And basically since then, you know, just developed an understanding of the space. My background is in finance. I thought I was going to be a normal portfolio manager at some point, working and not in this space, but you know, so I did all the degrees and whatever. But honestly, I got hooked with venture. I love venture capital. I spent a lot of time in tech, and I spent time in biotech, and I've slept on floors trying to raise money with guys like Peter Thiel and Google Ventures. But somehow I got back into mining through myself investing in things in 2017. This Paraguay gold thing, and then the management team didn't quite make things work, and so I just put my hand up to run it, and then that's where this formation came. And I also am the chief investment officer of the Earth Labs venture fund, the long only fund that kind of sits within it, and I've been doing that for a couple of years as well. So really venture capital broad, but very focused on mining for most of my career.
Interesting. That's a very interesting background, and I don't know of many CEOs in this space who are also portfolio managers. And obviously, being the portfolio manager of that fund, you have to study the space backwards and forwards and have a really deep knowledge of it. So that's very interesting. So the Copper Road project, so this is in Ontario, actually. So going through the deck and seeing the company's news of the last year, what struck me is, my God, this is a good location, right? Like, this is a superior location. Now, the ore body and whether the mine is there, that's the main question we're trying to answer here. That's the main question that Sterling is trying to answer. But the location is phenomenal. So how did you acquire this project?
You know, it's funny. This actually ties back to my Pine Tree days. In 2009, this woman, Judy Baker, who's a wonderful project sniffer, so to speak, she owned 4,000 hectares of this now 25,000. And it was over on the Lake Superior side, where there's this old mine called Copper Corp, and they did 1.5 million tons of 1.5% copper in the 60s and 70s. Very, very small sheeted veins. But I knew this project, and there was this aura of this grand thing, because 30 kilometers to the east is this mine called Tribag, where Teck mined it in the 60s and 70s, and they did almost 7 million tons of 2.75% in these really high-grade breccias. There are reports that show 25% copper over these 150-foot zones, like truly magnificent copper mineralization. And that's 30 kilometers apart. And so what's in the middle? And there was this porphyry discovered in the 60s, this Jogran Porphyry, which is literally like in the direct center of this project. And I followed along since then. I've owned it. I've sold it. There was some really good exploration done searching for IOCGs in 2014, 15, but more towards the Copper Corp place because nothing had been consolidated together. So in 2021, this whole thing got put together. The previous CEO of Copper Road Resources, John Timmons, did a really good job putting everything together. And then they raised some money. They drilled out things kind of in Tribag. They put things together, and I again followed along as an investor. On my portfolio side, I was very interested in it. And when they drilled and didn't get any market love, I had owned this project in Labrador, this very large sediment hosted project where we had raised $6.5 million on it. We drilled, didn't hit. And so we had some money. I realized that project was going to be now very early. And then still very great, but very early. So it's very hard for a public company to found on that. And so, approached the Copper Road shareholders and team. And I was like, look, we should put these things together. And so we bought the asset out of Copper Road. And so in May of 24, Sterling took Copper Road on, now called the Soo Copper Project. And so we've had it for literally 1 year. But it dates, my understanding of this project dates back a very long time, right? So it was a really exciting thing to bring in. There's so much copper here. There's 20% copper on surface everywhere. And it's Ontario forest. There are no porphyries in Ontario of copper. It's not a thing. You know what I mean? Like this is a weird project. And so
yeah, it's an oddity. It's an oddity because when you think Ontario, you do not think porphyries. I mean, this is a different setting. But it's fascinating. So it's not called the Copper Road Project. It's called the Soo Copper Project. Is that right?
Yeah, we just renamed it on this whole, the Soo Copper Project. I think that the thought process is, to your point, of access. So we, when we go for a site visit, we stay 10 minutes, 20 minutes north of Sault Ste. Marie. Sault Ste. Marie has a port, a direct port. There's a rail line that runs 10 kilometers from our project into that port. There's the highway takes you to the bridge to the USA. We were having lunch looking at the bridge. And so, that's an industrial hub that's been around a very long time, right? Very steel focused. And I think that the synergies that you could have with a city like that of 100,000 people in a copper mine that already is kind of an industrial place. They've talked about critical metals in the past and creating a hub for it. And I think that the idea was to create this tie because it's an hour from the Soo, and to get there, you fly into Sault Ste. Marie Airport, and in an hour you're on the road to the Porphyry from the highway. So it's a pretty easygoing transition between the two.
Yeah. So the highway, just kind of, I'm curious here. The Trans-Canada Highway, I mean, was that built in the 40s or the 50s?
Oh, I have no idea. That's a pretty good question. I don't know.
I just see that it's running along the lake there, and it's pretty close to the old Copper Corp mine. So I wonder if they built it so it would be able to give access to that mine.
Well, no, not for Copper Corp. I think Copper Corp was too small for that. But I mean, it connects to Wawa. It connects to Thunder Bay. I mean, it takes you around. Trans-Canada takes you around Lake Superior, right? And and so it is a true, like, it's a real highway. Like, this is not, we're not talking.
It's a Trans-Canada Highway. I mean, it runs across the whole country. It runs all the way to the Yukon.
Actually, the midway point across Canada is hilariously like 10 minutes south of our project. There's a plaque and a waterfall that's like this is the Trans-Canada Highway across Canada. That's kind of fun.
Okay, so location check. I mean, that's a huge check. Yeah. So let's dig into some of the details here. You just finished your first drill program. You reported one hole.
Yeah.
The hole was interesting. I'll say it was interesting. It definitely caught my attention. But obviously we need to see more. So tell us about the phase 1 program.
So like we'd said, there's a history here of 60, 70 years, right? I mean, this area, Phelps Dodge drilled 5 holes looking for moly back in the 60s. Like, it's a very sparse, everything's kind of piecemeal. So what we wanted to do in our first program, we drilled 4 holes, which is not even a program. It's like, let's just see what we get. And it's taking advantage of the easy mob. You don't have to build a camp. You don't have to set things up for a long time. So go in, test 4 holes, get out, see what you got, go back in, that kind of a thing, right? So these 4 holes, it's 1.1 kilometers apart. When we hit in this first hole, the these areas of really interesting chalcopyrite. That first 75 meters is kind of related to a structure that there's a bunch of chalco, these really rich, like 10% moly veins. So that was really interesting. That was a great way to start. But when we got into kind of the resistivity low that we were really targeting here, that was on the edge of where all this historic drilling, this 20 million ton resource of 0.2% copper and 0.05 moly, this historic resource, we're like, all right, there's this big resistivity low below it. Let's go see what that is. And let's understand that this is geophysics and big blobs are everywhere. And so you kind of just got to go see what it is. And so when we drilled it and when we hit the resistivity low and we started to find rocks that had never been found here before, or at least understood here before. So we found 3 different mineralized porphyries in porphyry dikes. We found these rich Bornite, highly altered mafics where the fluids from the porphyries were dumping into the mafic rocks, this permeable fluids like these rocks. And you had this relationship to the Keweenawen and the Mid-Continent Rift copper events. So like 1 billion years ago, there's 100 million years of copper mineralization that comes up, Duluth. It's also the nickel stuff that comes up as well. So Duluth, Eagle, Marathon, anything that's around Lake Superior for the Mid-Continent Rift. And so we're like, oh man, this is very interesting. We have Bornite, high alteration, and 0 pyrite, like almost nothing. And so you have this incredibly clean, incredibly promising these pieces of interval, right? So we show that there's like 40 meters here and 30 meters. These are these patches of Bornite and alteration. And so what makes this so exciting is that, when we drilled it, we're like, oh, it looks like you just clip it, right? Like it looks like you're just like, oh man, you have everything you want to find a very rich system, because those Bornite patches, they can carry 2-3% copper and 0.5 to 1 gram gold. So you're talking about like a very rich high tenor system where, you also have this big bulk tonnage model where, I mean, we ended that hole in 0.3%, 0.2% calco. So when we saw that, we drilled our 1.1 kilometer away hole because we wanted to just see something that's coming. And then we drilled 2 more holes in and around this because we were like, oh man, this is really interesting. And we need to vector this Bornite zone, this permeable horizon where these very, very rich fluids are dumping in. And because if you find a corridor of that, you're talking globally significant porphyry, because I'm with you, 0.36 is fine. It's from surface. There's some great PEAs out there and stuff like this. I mean, Surge and North Isle and Osisko Metals. And, you can see some economics and where it is in the world, to your point. Like you build a mine for sure at 0.3 and above. With such a clean con, you could. I think what gets us so excited and why we're so interested in this is because you have this downside protection of that. I'm with you. Like it is very interesting. That's what we were like, this is great. But we are all of the mind that we're just edging. Like this is 4 holes. Philo took 20 years to get there in a lot of holes.
Yeah, it's scout drilling. So you did 4 holes in a scout drilling program. So hole MJ 2501, 359.3 meters of 0.36% copper equivalent. That's a good start. Definitely a good start. And then you drilled 2 more holes around this Jogran Porphyry, which has a resource. So it's interesting. It's a low-grade porphyry, 20 million tons at 0.19% copper, 5% moly. So that's unlikely to be economic, even at like $6 copper. But it shows there's a system here. And so I'm just curious, what do you know about the objective of those 3 holes? Like, what were you testing? Is there an interpretation that actually that's not the main porphyry center, that there's another center here?
Well, that porphyry, that historic resource is one. So I mentioned that we've drilled 3, maybe 4 mineralized porphyries, right? And there are these dikes that come up. They're somewhere between 1 and 20 meters. And what happens is that they don't actually carry a lot of mineralization in them, but they dump into the mafic rocks around them. And that Jogran Porphyry is literally one later stage porphyry that carries this. It's the most boring of all the rock, but it carries, call it 0.15, really. I don't even think it's 0.15 copper, and this moly, which is really just these veins that kind of sporadically come around. So the system has a lot of rich moly in it. But that's one porphyry. And it's actually felsic porphyry rocks. Like it's verified by some of the best porphyry experts in the world. They came up here in 2019, and that is a porphyry. That's not even a center. That is one of the 3 or 4 that are there. And what we found is that the oldest porphyry, the one that predates that 100 million year mineralizing event, which we named this GFP Porphyry, which is simply because it was right before Good Friday. And so we said, well, it's a great Friday now. And so Great Friday. So we're like, that's what we're going to call it. And so that carries all the mineralizing events through it. And then it dumps. And that's where the Bornite comes through. And this old like that's where everything comes through. So discovering that was sort of the focus of the program in a way. And there's these breccia holes that were drilled at the end of 2023, 50 meters of 1%, 40 meters of 1.3% equivalent, great chunky chalcopyrite that have these clasts of old porphyry in them. So one of the things we were trying to do is prove that that was there. And so we have, and that's a kilometer apart from this hole. And so what's going to happen is we put these next holes out, and it's hard. This business sucks sometimes because you have to wait on assays, right? And I can't say anything while these assays are there. But of course, the story we know now that we're putting it together. And so you have to just wait, and it just delays. And I feel for shareholders who sit here, myself included, and you're just like, come on. The lab says, look, it's going to be ready last week. And but again, the advantage of this is like you get in, you drill 4 holes, you get out. So the thesis was this twofold. One, there is this 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5 kilometer resistivity low that goes down to the depths of the earth, 2,500 meters down, that comes up into this mineralization. It is a very, very large structure of something is there making it happen. Again, these are blobs in the ground. It was an airborne ZTEM survey in 2015. It connects to the resistivity that we did last year, this big 5 by 3 kilometer survey. And so you see that there's this big, very large system, and resistivity lows suggest conductivity, which means there's more copper kind of connected together. And you see these hearts of it below. So what we were trying to do is find your pathway down, see if there's a pathway down basically into the heart of this all. Because, you need something really rich, obviously underground to anything that's down there, you need something rich. But really the whole point is that there's a big system coming up, and you already have high grades at surface. You have that 1.3% breccia. So you're just trying to orient yourself so that you can try and figure this system out, because there's copper everywhere. There's a hole from the 90s that was drilled a kilometer even farther east from our hole. So now you have 2.6 kilometers strike. That had the last 50 meters was not assayed. Most of it wasn't sampled. You have Bornite chalcopyrite. You have a meter of 4% copper in it. This is a big system. And I think that that's what we're trying to get across. It's a very big system. We're trying to understand what the resistivity low meant. We're going to have to reconfigure everything, because again, you've seen blobs. Everyone has blobs in copper exploration, right? And so, it just shows you that there's something there. And so now we have to trust the rocks and kind of orient ourselves into it. And so that's the next program that we drill will be ideally doing that, right?
So slide 8 in the presentation, you show the Jogran Porphyry, and then you show 4 target areas around it based upon the soil trend, the high-grade soil trend, and then chargeability highs. Essentially, you got some pretty strong chargeability and low, resistivity in some of these targets. So one of the hole 1 was targeting one of these target areas. Were the other 2 holes that were drilled around the Jogran Porphyry, were they targeting the other 2 target areas?
So unfortunately, one thing that we came to really understand quickly in Ontario, we had some issues getting drillers on site. So we got a little delayed. As happens in junior spaces, the driller that we were supposed to have was hitting at another project, and they're like, well, we can't come now. So we just scramble, find a driller. We're a little bit delayed. And so we had to deal with the melt. So there's 9 feet of snow on the ground. And when it starts melting in the heat, your drill slides.
Yeah.
You drill these last 2 holes from a road, the only road you could drill, which got washed out about a week later. So they're not exactly perfect. Honestly, there were 2 holes we would have rather drilled. But we drilled these last 2 holes in a way that we were like, all right, so this is where we're going to drill, because that's what you have to do. But then we were like, all right, if we angle them in a certain way, we should be able to figure out this Bornite tough zone direction, right? We should be able to try and figure out the orientation of it all, but we missed where we think this whole thing comes to surface is about 400 meters south, which you have outcrop. You have this amazing outcrop 400 meters south where you get 16% copper and 1 gram gold and 3 grams uranium and a bunch of moly and all these different phases. And so the idea was to step down and drill that, but we couldn't. So that's the next program as well, is kind of putting that together. Because again, it really feels like we kind of just, like the Jogran Porphyry and all this stuff that's north, it just feels like you're clipping the top of it. And the resistivity would show that that actually is what you're doing. It dips down to the north. So in theory, we kind of showed that. But yeah, it would have been nice to have drilled this one hole that was where it came to surface. I love that hole. That's coming.
I see. Okay. So actually your vector is moving to the south of where this hole 2501 was drilled.
It seems that everything, so the resistivity shows that everything where MGI 2501 is drilled, if you walk south, and actually in the press release, you see that resistivity low beside it that gets really nice and juicy. That is kind of 300-400, that's south, and that's where we think it all kind of comes up. That's on the same horizon as the breccia, which is the 50 meters of 1%, 40 meters of 1%. And they're kind of together, and they're, I don't know, 900 meters apart, right? So we think that everything kind of comes up, dips to the north, and really all of our holes, I mean, our second hole drilled north. And we think, again, I think that we're just figuring out how it goes, and I don't want to commit to anything because it's 4 holes in and who knows. But we think we've got this sandbox. We're going to have some really nice images that come now. Like when we get these assays out, we'll have a lot more that sort of shows what the sandbox is that we're playing in. Our advisor, Neil O'Brien, likes to say that he's like, all right, we've got a sandbox. And our sandbox is actually about 500 meters by 2.5 kilometers now. Mm-hmm. And it's like, so we know we should be here. This is where we should be.
So, looking at the property map, the Soo Project map, the boundaries, you have the Copper Corp mine in the southwest. You have the Tri-Bag mine in the northeast, and your current sandbox is right smack in the middle along the southwest to northeast trend. So my question would be, knowing this industry, great location, freaking awesome location, off highway, off Lake Superior, in elephant country. We know there's mines all around the lake in the US and Canada. Why did the previous operators not find this bullseye in the middle then?
It's a really the story of junior mining in general is a lot of people drill shallow and then don't go deep, and we didn't even go deep here because we stopped. Even though you're in mineralization, you're like, man, I'm going to run out of money. John and the team had very little dollars to work with. They were actually pretty close in a hole that they drilled at the end of 2023. I think if they just kept going, they probably would have gotten into more interesting stuff. And no one had this porphyry area until about 2018. So it was basically held in different prospector hands who they work very closely with us now. Actually, our core is in their is in one of their backyard. And so it was held in different hands. Basically from 1974 until 2008, there was this moratorium on staking across this property because Tri-Bag shut down, Copper Corp shut down. So it's a story of it's just very sparse land. I think that even to us, I mean, like, again, we drilled this is great because of what's in it. And it's just porphyries are hard. Like we think that they're these big blobs in the ground, and they're just not doesn't work that way where you just drill a bunch of holes and that's right there. I think that you can
definitely miss. I mean, it's generally a pretty big target area. It's certainly a larger target area than like a high grade, narrow gold vein, but you can absolutely miss these things if you drill at the wrong orientation or you're not in the right ballpark, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, definitely, you can miss. So basically, your answer to the question is they were drilling shallower, and previous operators had run out of capital with holes that missed in other parts of this property package, and also nobody had this exact area until 2018. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I mean, the guys that had this before, Copper Road Resources, they spent a fair bit of money up by the Tribag mine. They drilled a lot of that old breccia. That was a very rich breccia. Teck had a historical resource there of about 300 million tons of 0.15 copper, which is still there. That is a lot of drilling that it takes to get to 300 million ton resource. They thought that there was a source for it all that they could tap into, so they spent a fair bit of money there. They were tapped for capital a little bit. They came back to this area. They drilled these breccia holes, which were kind of drilled before, but they drilled the breccia holes, and they drilled these Jogran holes. And the Jogran holes they drilled were 340 meters of 0.13 copper and 0.02 moly kind of thing, right? And that was only in Jogran, that one porphyry. And they just didn't quite get out of it. We got out of it. We drilled under it, right? So we were out of that kind of dilutive material in a way, right? And we got into these different rocks. They actually ended their second hole there in 0.4 copper in one of these mafics. But again, you can't see it, and you know, trying to figure out how to stop a drill program when you're tight on capital is an unfair thing to junior mining, because it's very hard, because you're like, we could kill the project. We know we've drilled enough now to get there, and so I think that we had capital. They had a 3-cent stock, and I think that we, you know, I think that it worked out. I think that we're gonna find something big here, and there's a 50-50 split, so everyone kind of wins.
So this is an oddity, because it's in the Mid-Continent Rift copper belt, and most of that copper belt runs through the lake. So we're not going to be mining in the lake, but the belt clips your project area. And also you have a neighbor. Tell us about your neighbor who has a very big land package with lots of copper showing. So what do you know about what they're doing?
Which neighbor?
Viridian?
Oh, so that's a different project. So
yeah.
Is in our focus to find copper. This all started in Labrador with sediment hosted copper, and our sediment hosted copper project in Labrador. That was what we raised $6.5 million.
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a different project.
But that project is fascinating. That's kind of in our back pocket. Viridian is a $40 million market cap, and they staked with BHP 2,600 square kilometers all around. Literally, if you look at our presentation, it's a fun map.
Okay, so that's the number 2 project for Sterling.
That's our number 2 project. That's right.
I see.
Yeah.
So they have a 40 million market cap. They you know, ring staked you in Labrador.
A lot of
and this is a copper project too, right?
That's also a copper project. So that has historic drilling on it. Sediment hosted copper, it's totally different than porphyry hunting. Sediment hosted copper is wonderful. Central Africa, I mean, you know, Kamoa and Friedland, that's what's built on. There's a lot of hype about it right now. In northern Canada, you see in North Nunavut, like America West and Aston Bay, created a lot of hype with this thing, and just across the bay from Polaris, which is pretty far north. But and then you're getting new interesting things from these Aussies at White Cliff that drilled 170 meters at 3%. And the sediment hosted copper, when you find it, I mean, Friedland and Kamoa presents resources as like 50 square kilometers. It's not like tonnage, it's like kilometers. It's insane. So some of the great things in the world for copper are hundreds of years old and sediment hosted. And so we went after that in Labrador and drilled and didn't really hit what we had this old Noranda data. We're chasing these 9 meters of 2% copper holes, and it's like a basin. It's like kind of like a coal seam if you think about it, that gets really thick. And we look like we're on the wrong side of the basin, to be perfectly honest. It's a 45 by 12 kilometer property, so it's very large. And you know, your helicopter access, and so spent a couple $1 million there. We thought we actually hit some amazing stuff, and the assays didn't quite come back. We had 7 different kinds of copper sulfides in all different colors. And so that project, I'm convinced that project will matter. It's in the central mineral belt, fascinating geology, big, globally significant structures that you're dealing with, right? So like when it's there, it's big, which is why you have BHP and Viridian staking 2,600 square kilometers. You know, I'll throw in a jab of there's 70 copper showings on all that. There's like 300 copper showings on ours. And I think that the middle of it all, like you can see, it's pretty fun. So I hope that they are so successful up there, because that only would bode well for us. Cause I think that at some point, you know, that there's a lot of relation there. Right. So.
Okay. So, but that's on the back burner, and your sole focus is on the Soo Copper Project. So tell us about I know you can't say exactly what the rest of the year is going to bring, but once you get these assays back for the 3 pending holes and you do the interpretation, you put out the new graphics and everything, what would you bet will happen in the second half of the year?
I probably can do better than bet. I can probably, I probably can. So we're going to start drilling again in August. We already kind of know where we're going, truthfully. We have to redo the geophysics interpretation a little bit because that chargeability reference is nonsense, like utter nonsense. Like it didn't work. Chargeability didn't work here. Resistivity works. We're going to tighten it up. It's sad because chargeability, we thought it was like, it's screaming. You're like, oh man, but it's just something about the contrast of the rocks. I don't know. So we got to redo that, which we are right now. And in parallel, we're going to downhole probe and figure out the orientation of this all. And then really though, I hate to say it, but like we kind of just finished half of our first program. Like there are still 4 more to 6 more holes that you kind of need to show that first pass of the system. Like I said, we drilled from a road. That wasn't even a hole that really was in our plan. So we're going to drill again in August. And then we're going to add to that program our knowledge of these 4 holes, which is so lucky for a junior to be able to do. Like our first program was $600,000 for, almost 2,000 meters. And you kind of got in, got out, happy. And
$600,000 CAD?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
so that's among the lowest cost drilling in the world.
It's definitely right up there. And I mean, like, all in cost is very hard. So we have the same team. We've been together 4 years now. So I don't include my geology team that is, and staff. Like I don't include that, but anything that's coming in is cost, right? So that's in there. So, if you say that the company's $100,000 a month burn all in geology and hard, like geology and G&A with team, and then the extra $600,000 is the program, which took 6 weeks, right? So it is a very cheap place to drill. And I think that it would be foolish not to take advantage of the fact that, there's so many drillers in Ontario and you can kind of go in and go out. I mean, in Labrador, we had to spend $400,000 on a helicopter just to be able to go in and out, $400,000 on flow planes to do it. And then, you have your drill costs, which is so difficult, right? Because everything's moved. So here, no problem. It's right off of a road. And so to be able to split your program up is so advantageous. And it allows a junior like us with a 15 million market cap to actually do it. Like we can drill this out. Like it's not, porphyries are so scary because it's a lot of drilling. It's a long time. It's a lot of drilling. And so it's expensive and dilutive, but in this case, it's just, it can work. Right. So, I think that
Do
is.
you feel like you learned anything from the phase 1 program with the with the challenge you had with the driller who said I can't leave, and then you got into the melt and
Don't drill in April and May. That's for sure.
Don't drill in April and May. Okay, yeah.
Of that,
it's interesting how many companies experience the same slip up. I've heard the story quite a few times, yet companies still mobilize in late March for some reason, and they inevitably hit the spring melt and the drill program doesn't go according to plan.
We would have actually been okay ish if our drillers hadn't canceled last minute. We did hit it. It was an exceptionally snowy winter. I agree with you though, for sure. The press honestly is you have horizons, like you have horizons of capital raising, and no one wants to raise money. No one wants to give you money and then sit around for 3 months while you wait around and spend money as a junior on not drilling, right? You kind of have these like periods of time, the beginning of the year, all the conferences, people like writing checks, then you do it. I think that if we had just started 3 weeks earlier, it would have been fine, I think. But yes, it was a real pain. I have been on the other side of the table being like, why would you drill then?
Yeah, no, that's a good explanation though. So when people give you money in February and March, they expect news flow in June approximately. And so you kind of just have to do it. And, sometimes the spring melt is not the end of the world in certain areas.
Very bad.
But in other areas, it can be pretty bad. Yeah.
And there was probably, just to elaborate on that, probably 125 grand of 100 to 125 grand of extra cost in that program, which is already cheap. We had to rent this like fat truck, like it was 20 grand to rent a fat truck, a moon vehicle, right? That like allowed us to go in and out of sight. That was insane. Then you have like 50 grand to move a drill because it takes a truck 900 times to put it around. So the amount of cost that was in there, that wasn't even drilling. And we didn't get, so we've learned, we'll be a little bit more specific, but at the end of the day, we did prove what we wanted to prove, which is that this system is much more than this single porphyry or these little breccias. It's a big, big thing. And now we have this evidence to support it. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons to be very happy with this program. I think that it was a great success. I'm even happier to start drilling again. All of us are basically just like, we just want to keep drilling because, like, all right, we got this, but like, there's so many more things to answer here before you really know what you have here, right?
So you're drilling in August. You're putting that out there. So does that mean you'll have the rest of the holes in the next few weeks?
I was hoping we were going to have the rest of the holes 2 weeks ago, but unfortunately, labs get backed up. Things take time. You know, I've gone through about 9 labs now. It's all the same. So in different continents and countries, and it's the same. So it's a real bummer for our space because, you know, it's, you wait on news. We kind of have an idea of what we need to do next. You want to see assays, how they associate with things. I think that, you know, August, assuming we have drillers lined up, I'll just prorate, I'll put that out there, but that would be the target, would be an August drill program, which means you kind of get things going. You know, you go through Labor Day, people come back to work, you should have news, you know what I mean? Like it should be a really good story going through the fall. But yeah, you
want to have something to talk about at Beaver Creek, right? I mean, that would be ideal, right?
That's kind of the timing, right? So, and again, copper is one of those things that is very fortunate for visuals. And now we kind of have this first 4 holes to say, all right, so massive calco vein or Bornite area. And really, I think that gold is going to become a bit more of the story because I think that the gold associated with the Bornite, where you get the 0.5 grams, the 0.6 grams, and the 2% copper, that in like these 2 meter intervals, that is going to become a thing. And I think that we all are like, wow, no pyrite, very rich. These moly veins, there are veins that have moly, calco, Bornite, gold, and like all together, and quartz, and like no dilutive materials. And so I think that if we can figure this out, you know, we're all the potential here for something very special is high. And I think that, you know, you've got this great bulk tonnage target. It's good. Like, I'm not knocking that by any means, right? Because that's great. But I think that as a starting point, knowing that there's this giant resistive low feeder, that there's these higher grade areas, that the 30-kilometer mineral system, and I think that we're going to find more of these too, like over the years. I think that this is just the first start. We just got this. This is a big project with a lot of different potential to show not just one of these areas, but multiple. So it's exciting. We're really pumped to be here. This is a great project to work on.
All right, so Sterling Metals CEO Matt Wilson, it looks like we'll have final results in the next few weeks, and then perhaps a plan for phase 2 at some point later in the summer, and then the next stage of drilling by the end of August. At least that's the timeline today, but this is junior mining, so things can change. Thank you, Matt. Pleasure.
Wow, Robert, that was great.